Good morning. Before I begin, I really want to address a matter close to the heart of Reverend Moon, our founder, who we like to refer to as our true father or true parents. And it's a matter really close to my heart as well, and that is soccer. So earlier, the Peace Cup that Elvis was introducing, perfect introduction to this sermon. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's been the European tournament happening, the European soccer tournament. There's been the Copa America tournament happening. And so the England team has been playing in this European tournament. And last Tuesday, we were down 1-0. And we were nearly completely done with the game. We were at the 90th minute, and miraculously, we got a goal back to draw 1-1. At this point, this is a real test for England fans all across the world and all soccer fans in general. And it's definitely a journey of faith that we go through when you're trying to root for your team. So at the 94th minute, we score and win the game in the last kick of the game. And that was on Tuesday. So everyone's celebrating. Everyone was like ecstatic and really pleased. However, there were videos of English fans leaving the stadium in the 89th minute, and they, it was potentially a national embarrassment for the team. So some were leaving with their heads down, and then they hear people celebrating, and they were like knocking on the stadium to try to get back in, but they couldn't get back in. So those who stayed, you could probably hear a few prayers like, please God, let's score a goal here. Come on, let's bring it back. And then when we score again, people are like, my prayer's working. Wow, my faith is working. And then we went through. So yesterday was the semi-final, and again we were losing 1-0 down in the 80th minute. We score back. We go all the way to penalties, and the last kick of the game, England win again. So it's definitely a journey of faith, and I don't know if we'll win a European championship this year. I don't know if America will win the Copa America tournament at all. So will we see them win in our lifetime? I don't know. Will we see America or England win the World Cup in 2026? Again, I don't know. But we could have faith that one of our two teams could win. I'm American and English, so I'm rooting for both teams at this point. So now, that's out of my system. I got soccer out of my system. I want to start off by asking a question. How much time do we have left on this earth? Maybe it's 1 year or 5 years. Maybe it's 20 years, 40 years, maybe even 80 years for some of us younger folk. But did you know by the age of 18, you have spent already 90% of your life with your parents by the age of 18. And so I live halfway around the world from mine. So I've estimated I probably have already spent 97% of my life with my parents, which means I only have 3% left to spend with them. So time is the most precious thing that we have, and we get to decide how to use it. Maybe we will see England or the USA win a soccer tournament at some point. There's no guarantee. There is one guarantee, death and taxes. And I'm not going to talk about death, and I definitely won't be talking about taxes today. So what I will be talking about is putting our faith into action. And I want to talk about consciously living a life of faith. And note that I'm referring to living as a verb here. And I'm going to talk about, how can we, in our everyday life, put our faith into action. When we're in our busy lives, when do we practice our faith? Is it just on the Sunday, and then Monday comes around and we just put it off to one side until next Sunday? Or can we practice it daily, every day in even the most minute things that we do? As I said earlier, time is finite, and the physical world does have an end, and we all have an end in this world. So we as a community of faith have intentionally chosen to center ourselves on our families and our societies and center ourselves on God. So what does that mean? It means actively striving to become loving human beings, that we look out for one's neighbor, we raise families centered on God-centered principles, and we seek to try to make a positive impact on this world. But none of that happens without action. It's really easy to just talk the talk and believe it, but then if we don't act on it, none of that happens. So James 2, verse 17 says, "In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." So I'll repeat that again. In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And if I was to rephrase this quote, we could say faith accompanied by action is well and alive, right? If you could flip that quote on its head and say faith accompanied by action is well and alive. And so I do want to challenge all of you here today. What can you do in our daily lives to put our faith into action? Reverend Moon said, "How many times during the day are you aware of God's existence? How many times during 24 hours do you feel God's presence? How can people who are determined to be saved through attendance attend God just 1 or 2 hours in a day?" God is something you need more desperately than even the air. God is something you need more desperately than even the water. God is more precious than your meals. Yet, do you really feel this? And that was in August 16th of 1970. So our family last weekend went to the Great Sand Dunes National Park. Hands up, who's aware of the Great Sand Dunes National Park? Okay, so the Great Sand Dunes National Park, it's 750-foot tall sand dunes, 30 miles wide, roughly 4 hours away from Denver. You've got 13,000-foot mountains behind the sand dunes as well. And it's formed by the right combinations of wind, water, and sediment. So it's like the biggest sandbox in the world, excluding the actual desert. So when you're there and you look at it, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And you're like, wow, God, I'm feeling your presence, you know? How many times during the day are you aware of God's existence? When you're in the Great Sand Dunes, the answer is constantly. Like, this is just astounding. You're feeling inspired. It's a beautiful nature, and you feel like you can connect to a higher purpose. When we ask the second question, how many times during 24 hours do you feel God's presence? The answer is, well, I feel God's presence like most of the time. This is great. That's probably one of the reasons why all of us love to kind of connect to nature and go to national parks and kind of connect to something greater than just ourselves. So when at the Great Sand Dunes, it made me reflect on a song, which was the song Erative so beautifully sung. And in the second verse, it said, "Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one." And that verse, thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one, is the way I interpret that is we, God and I, are united. And I attend you as thy true Son. And I am present with you always, and I will act as such. That's where we want to kind of get to, right? However, it's really easy to feel God's presence, ready to act, and love thy neighbor when we're on a high. When we're feeling good, everything's going great, you feel like, oh yeah, I can connect to God fairly easily. This is what I want to be. So going back to the Great Sand Dunes, halfway up the Sand Dune Mountains, the wind is picking up. Guess what happens? You get sand in one's eyes. And we are hiking with 4 children who turn their heads into the wind. And so, a chorus of crying begins. It starts with 1, goes to 2, all of a sudden all four crying, you're screaming their heads off, right? And there is nothing that will test your patience and kind of knock your own kind of resolve and will down a peg or two by 4 children crying in your ear, right? And I'm sure all parents can relate with the prayer that goes along the lines of, dear God, please make it stop. That's where, when we ask the question, are you aware of God's presence during that time? No, I'm not. How many times during 24 hours do you feel his presence? Right now, I'm not feeling anything. I'm dead inside. But honestly, no, the children make us become better human beings every day. And we're constantly soaking up the moments of pure joy, pure laughter. And it's just a way that we can grow and develop as parents. Just the other day, just a side note, my brother-in-law came round to our house yesterday, and the first thing Winston says is, I love you so much. First thing, it's just so pure, and he's like, I love you so much. And so he's living in that present moment, right? And it was like, oh, that's something that maybe we should be kind of trying to attain, right? Being in that present moment, trying to attend God and act with God in such a way. So going back to that quote, our founder, Reverend Moon, True Father, brings up this concept of attendance. Attending God 24/7 involves acting to connect and be present with God. So daily life is 24 hours, right? And my question to everyone here is, how do we attend God in 24 hours? And I want to break it down for everyone here. So we sleep roughly around 8 hours. I know some people need 10 hours sleep, and some people can handle with 5 hours sleep. But let's say we sleep 8 hours. And then we either go to work, we go to school, we're taking care of the children, being a homemaker. That's already 66% of the day. Then we eat lunch, breakfast, dinner. Let's call this 2 hours. We commute, or we have to travel around, right? That takes up probably an hour, maybe 2 hours of our day. We do chores, or we try to do chores. That's also another hour of the day. And then the remaining 2 hours is we're either reading, resting, watching TV, playing sports, working out, and so that's maybe 2 hours that we get to ourselves, right? And then the day starts all over again, right? And so in that breakdown, when are we finding time to attend God? Where are we taking the action, not just to just say a 1-minute prayer and say, oh, that's how I've attended God today. But how do we kind of act in a way that our faith guides us to act? How do we love thy neighbor? How do we incorporate prayer into our daily lives, not just at meal times? Putting others first, and also being a good steward of creation. So I asked myself this question, and this is the reason why I wanted to give the talk, is, am I even putting my faith into action? And I think I'll be the first to say, no, I don't think I am, and I want to do better at putting my faith into action. And I have all the excuses in the world. I'm struggling to find time, because I can make all the excuses off the top of my head, right? I have 4 children. I've got work that is very demanding, right? We constantly have chores. There's always washing, there's always cleaning, there's always something to do, right? So my excuse is like, I have no time whatsoever, right? But I don't want to make that excuse. And I think deep down inside, all of us, have probably a very valid and good excuse as to why we can't find the time to, incorporate our faith into the actions that we do on a daily basis. So if I'm breaking down this day of 24 hours, and I take 24 hours as 100% of the day, how much of the day am I attending God? Maybe 1% of the day. Sometimes it's 12%. And on a Sunday, really good day, I'm maybe hitting like 43%, right? And so you should think about the breakdown of your week and day, right? And put it in terms of a metric, and a percentage, and actually measure and see, are we putting that faith into action, or are we just believing that, because we have faith, that's all well and good, but we can just live our lives in a very passive way. So I do want to encourage everyone to look around corners and look for those opportunities. And, those opportunities where we can recognize that intersection between our life and faith. So I wanted to share a story of that intersection. And Elvis so wonderfully introduced the story that I was going to give, which is I fly a decent amount for work. And so I'm interested, hands up, who, when they catch a flight, they prefer to put the headphones in and talk to no one. All right, around like maybe 50% of the audience. Who catches a flight and says, okay, I'm going to say hi to the person next to me, and then I'm going to not talk to them for the rest of the flight? Who does that? All right, you're being kind of kind, you're like, oh, hi, how's it going? Oh, you put your bag on the top there, okay, cool, you're off to the same place I'm going off to. You already know that, but you ask that question anyhow. And then for the rest of the flight, you're kind of quiet and you go along with your flight. Okay, so now for the really weird people. Who likes to have a conversation on a plane? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we've got a few people who like to have a conversation on a plane. So I will confess, if you want to talk to me on a plane, I will talk to you. And I've been told off for talking too loud on a plane. That's a different story, but that was quite embarrassing. So because I do travel a decent amount for work, I do try to pray and take a moment to think to myself, all right, if the person next to me wants to talk or strikes up a conversation, and I make an effort to say, hi, how's it going? Then I kind of say a kind of an internal prayer that God will send me people that I'm meant to sit next to. And I don't know if that's a true fact or not, but every time I take a flight, typically I say kind of an internal prayer. If God's sending me a person to sit next to me, then it's meant to be. And so there was this one man who sat next to me, and at first I was really disappointed, because guess what? He's my height. He's 6'4", but he's very broad-shouldered, and I prefer sitting next to a small person. So we're trying to get in the plane, and we're hunched up like this, right? And we're like, oh, hey, how's it going, right? But he's also similar to me, very extroverted, so we strike up the conversation straight away. And initially we start off with some small talk, which is the classic British way to start a conversation. So I said, oh, we're heading to Wisconsin, right? So I say, oh, how's the weather in Wisconsin? Weather in Wisconsin's not that great, nothing like Denver. Oh, yeah, Denver, the weather's amazing. We get sun 300 days of the year. Anyhow, I'm not going to go over the whole small talk, but we go on like this for probably 5 minutes. But I come to find out he has raised $3. And I say, hey, I have $3. And so I ask him, how did you go about raising $3? Can you give me some guidance, some advice on raising a family? And kind of, he owned his own company. And so I was kind of genuinely interested in kind of his guidance. So For the 2-hour, 45-minute flight to Wisconsin, we spoke about God, we spoke about family, we spoke about life challenges. He spoke about raising $3 and raising a God-centered family too. And we were both very loud at this point, right? I'm sure the entire plane felt like they were getting a sermon for 2.5 hours. But I didn't really care. So at the end of the flight, I'm like, wow, that was a fantastic conversation, like great high. At the end of the flight, he says, "Can I get your contact information?" And I'm like, sure. I tend to not really think about these things, so I'm like, oh yeah, you contact me anytime. Here's my address, here's my phone number, like, let's keep in contact. So 2 weeks later, I get this book in the post. It's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. 10 Secrets Every Father Should Know. And so I'm like, cool, awesome book. I'll probably read it someday. And then I open it to the first page, and he's write a personal note for me. And so this was July 12th of 2021, and I'd like to read this note to everyone here. Okay, he starts off by saying, "Dear David, an orator." And I'm like, how does he know orator? Obviously, I speak about orator all the time. I think she'll be embarrassed how much I speak about orator. But he says, "Dear David, an orator, this book shaped mine and Samantha's life. As I mentioned, it's a tougher read. Leona and Adelina will benefit from you reading it. I read it once a year. David, take 1 weekend a year for an individual daddy-daughter weekend. Do whatever they want to do. Have them make the agenda. It's part of their adventure. It does not need to be expensive. Pass this book on. Purchase one now for all your friends in the future that are having a girl. For our girl Sam, we went to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, dressed up and watched a Disney movie and walked the town shops. We also camped a lot. For the last trip, we took a camping trip for 2 weeks to the Smoky Mountains. David, you will be the most important person in your daughter's life till they turn 13. God bless. Go Bucks. P.S. If you ever build a home, call me for help." Isn't that cool? That, like, just from a random flight to Wisconsin, you kind of make that a personal connection with someone. And I've read this book, and I think it's helped me reflect on how do I raise my daughters. And so, that was almost 3 years ago to the day, and it's moments like that where I think to myself, that's an intersection of my life and my faith, right? But there's all of this, there's those opportunities everywhere, every day, in everything we do. And it doesn't need to just be on a plane. So I'm not saying you should just speak to everyone on the plane now. The point is, look for those life intersections. So you may be asking yourself right now, what actions can I take? Maybe it's volunteering. We do a spring refresh here at church, trying to be good stewards of creation. It's prayer, meditation, that's an action. Studying religious texts. Participating in our faith community. Mentoring. Maybe calling someone up, checking in how they're doing, right? And not just saying, "Oh, how are you?" and the response is, "How are you?" But really kind of checking up on someone. It could be even the smallest thing. So for example, pouring tea for your spouse first before you pour tea for yourself. And it could be kind of discussions, teaching principle, right? And having a discussion on principle and how we can all better ourselves. And for me, spending time with your children, right? I would say that's a practice of faith that I value. So the point here is that we can better our spiritual lives of faith by focusing on being 1% better every day. And so I want to introduce the concept of the power of marginal gains through another sports anecdote, which is cycling. And if Tour de France is happening right now, if you're not watching the Tour, it's amazing. It's a grueling 21-day cycling event all over France. But in 2003, there was a British cycling team, and they were struggling with performances. They haven't won the Olympic gold since 1908, and the British cycling team won no Tour de France titles ever. And so the sports director introduced this concept of marginal gains, focusing on making numerous small 1% improvements in various aspects of cycling. So these included optimizing how your seat is set up, using kind of sensors, tracking your health data, your heart rate, even down to what pillow are you sleeping on at night to make sure they slept the best sleep of their lives so they're ready for the next day. And so these seemingly minor adjustments led to significant achievements. So within 5 years, British cycling dominated the 2008 Beijing Olympics. They won 60% of the gold medals in cycling. That's unprecedented. By the 2012 London Olympics, they set multiple Olympic records and world records. And during the time between 2012 and 2017, they won the Tour de France 5 times in a row. So that was like an unprecedented era of success for that British cycling team. And so that the principle of marginal gains demonstrates that small, consistent improvements can lead to extraordinary results over time. So this concept applies broadly to everything in our lives, right? Focusing on making small daily improvements and building up those habits. And the result is long-term success. And I believe that we can apply that same concept of marginal gains to our spiritual lives. Day by day, when we take a consistent action in our faith, I think you start growing in spirit, and you create that positive impact for oneself, one's family, and also for one's community. And so we can apply the power of marginal gains to our spiritual lives. And that again, I want to ask the question for everyone here: how can I do that in my daily life? This is a quote by a modern-day Quaker theologian who actually lives here in Denver, Colorado, Richard Foster. And he said that each activity of daily life in which we stretch ourselves on behalf of others is a prayer in action. So I'll read that again. Each activity of daily life in which we stretch ourselves on behalf of others is a prayer in action. So to conclude, going back to the beginning, I asked, how much time do we have left on this earth? Maybe it's not enough time to see England or the USA win the World Cup, but that's okay. However, we do have the capacity every day to consistently pursue putting our faith into action. So I challenge you today, what can you do today, tomorrow, next week, and over the next year to put your faith into action? Thank you. Join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Parent, we're grateful to congregate here as a community of faith where we each want to improve and work on ourselves and practice our faith on a daily basis. And we pray for your guidance as we go out into this next week, whether it's working, schooling, and everything in between. And we want to be aware of your presence. We want to kind of walk hand in hand with you and take actions in our daily life, whether big or small. So we're grateful for all the blessings that we have, and grateful for this faith community, and we pray for a great week ahead. And we pray this in our names, David and narrator Fortune, and bless Central family. Amen and adieu.